A black student had just transferred to a prestigious private school, but from the very first day, he was looked down on for his worn-out shoes and brandless shirt. The sneering glances, the whispered remarks, and even open bullying quickly turned him into an outcast. No one knew. He was the principal's son. And when the truth came out, the very ones who had mocked him found themselves shunned by their own friends. At Crestwood, you didn't need to say a word to prove you belonged. From the red brick walls washed clean each morning to the perfectly pruned elm trees lining the walkway like chess pieces waiting for a more powerful player's move. Everything whispered the same message. We are not like the rest. Ethan Parker understood that the moment he stepped through the school gates. 16, black, lean but wiry, he carried an old, faded gray backpack with one strap just starting to fray. His uniform lacked the designer logos or monogrammed names some students had, just a plain white shirt and neatly pressed khakis, clean, respectable, but not enough to hide how out of place he felt. At Crestwood, it was often what you didn't wear that caught the most attention. Across the quad, under a sunlit awning, a group of students stood in the effortless posture of those used to belonging. At the center was Bradley Whitmore, white, tall, with a head of salon-cut waves that looked straight out of the Upper East Side. A gleaming silver Rolex on his wrist, a gift from his father after summering in France. His blazer fit like it was tailored in Milan, and his Italian leather shoes didn't have a single scuff. For Bradley, Crestwood wasn't a place to learn. It was a place to reaffirm what had already been decided. His eyes narrowed as Ethan approached. One boy in the group, Nolan, wearing a blazer too, this one with a tiny gold pin, tilted his chin toward Ethan and muttered, "Scholarship kid. Total diversity quota vibe." Bradley smirked, not bothering to hide it. "Welcome to Crestwood," he drawled, stretching out each word like he was savoring it. "Guess they really are letting just anyone in now." The group chuckled. Not loud, but sharp, precise. The kind of laugh reserved for people who believed they were born to stand above others. Ethan heard them. Of course he did. They weren't that far away. Their voices weren't that low. But he didn't flinch, didn't pause. He simply tilted his head, a slight nod, polite, almost strangely dignified, and kept walking toward class. His steps were steady and slow. But inside, his heartbeat thudded like a drum tapped softly, rhythmically. Not out of fear, not even out of anger, but because this air, charged with judgment, was all too familiar. An air where every glance was a measure, every smile a warning, every silence a quiet sentence. At Crestwood, no one said, "We don't want your kind here." They didn't have to. A glance, a whispered comment, a well-timed pause, and just one step of space left in between. That was enough. And that single step might as well have been a wall of glass, invisible but impenetrable, keeping you out, letting the loneliness in. Ethan knew he wasn't like them, not just because of his skin, but because of how he'd gotten here, not through legacy or connections, but through something few at this school could truly grasp: grit. The kind of quiet endurance that came from working twice as hard for half as much, from a hunger, not to be accepted, but to prove he didn't need acceptance to survive. That day in class, no one asked Ethan a thing. No one pointed. No one said a word aloud. But the silence settled around him like a thin veil of smoke, seeping into his skin. No one touched him, and yet he could feel it, how he was being pushed out of the circle, not with hands, but with eyes, with the deliberate choice not to look. A single yellow leaf drifted to the pavement behind him as he entered the main building. On the large wall overhead, a gleaming brass plaque read, "Crestwood, where the exceptional shine." Ethan didn't look up, but in his chest, a quiet question stirred. Exceptional? By whose definition? Monday lunch was always the busiest time in Crestwood's cafeteria. The air buzzed with chatter, the clatter of trays, and the mingled smells of pizza and upscale meals from the parent-approved menu. Even food had its own social strata here. Ethan chose an empty table tucked in a corner where sunlight didn't quite reach, and no one sat nearby. He didn't know anyone yet, and no one had made an effort to know him. On his tray, a chicken, sandwich, a carton of milk, and an apple. Simple, clean, enough to satisfy. But to many eyes at Crestwood, that lunch was silent proof of something else entirely. Not enough. Before he could take the first bite, he heard a faint giggle behind. "Him! Oh my God, careful, Bradley!" A girl's voice rang out, tinged with mock excitement. Quick footsteps. And then, plop. An entire tray, creamy pasta, egg salad, and a full cup of soda spilled straight onto Ethan's shoulder and chest. White sauce clung to his collar, slid down the front of his shirt, and the soda spread in warped patterns across the fabric. It happened in seconds, executed with eerie precision. "Oops," Bradley said, half bending, still holding the now empty tray. He pressed his lips together, then shrugged. That casual, practiced shrug of someone who never had to mean an apology. "Sorry about that. Forgot your shirt probably isn't dry clean friendly." His words floated out, soft as a breeze, but sharp enough to cut. A single beat of silence, and then the group behind him burst out laughing. Not playfully, but with the glee of a verdict passed. A laugh that said, "We're still in control." Ethan stood still, drenched, cold, the smell of cafeteria food clinging to both his clothes and his pride. But he didn't react, didn't raise a hand, didn't speak up, didn't shout, "Stop." He simply looked down at the stains as if reading some invisible script, then slowly brushed the salad from his sleeve. With slightly trembling fingers, all around, dozens of students watched. Not one said a word. No one stood. No one asked, "Are you okay?" No one turned to Bradley and said, "That's enough." Worse yet, in the far corner of the cafeteria, a staff member, navy blazer, name tag gleaming, had seen everything. His eyes flicked from Ethan to Bradley. He paused for half a second, then looked away, pretending to check his phone. Ethan saw it all. Not just the action, but the silent permission wrapped in indifference. Maybe the worst part wasn't the mess on his shirt. Maybe it was knowing that if he did speak up, this entire room would only remember him as the angry black kid who couldn't keep it together. At a nearby table, a classmate glanced his way, their mouth opened slightly, as if to say something. But then Bradley's cold steel gaze swept across them. They lowered their head quickly and pushed their tray farther away, putting distance between themselves and the trouble they almost cared about. Silence spread like a virus, killing off any fragile trace of conscience before it could find a voice. Above, the cafeteria's flickering fluorescent lights buzzed faintly. The polished wooden tables bore no sign of injustice, but beneath that sterile glow, Ethan was no longer just a student. He was a mirror reflecting everything no one wanted to face: prejudice, silence, and the daily choice between decency and comfort. He walked away without a word, leaving behind the dying echoes of laughter that sounded more like the victory cry of cowards. All that remained was a damp trail stretching from his heels to the cafeteria door, and a quiet question stirring in the minds of those who'd witnessed it, though none would dare speak it aloud. Why didn't anyone do anything? What would you do if you were the one who witnessed that moment? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you believe that silence is a form of complicity, hit like to help us spread more stories that carry a powerful message. Afternoon recess. The sky was still clear, the sunlight still draped golden over the tiled courtyard, but the atmosphere had shifted. Everything felt slower, as if the whole school was holding its breath. After the cafeteria incident, the name, Ethan Parker, became the most whispered topic on campus, yet no one dared say it aloud. No one dared look at him for more than 3 seconds. Still, every step Ethan took seemed to freeze the air around him, like everyone was waiting for an explosion or a quiet kind of fire. He walked as he always did, his shirt mostly cleaned, though a faint scent of sauce still clung to the fabric. No anger, no tears, just a cold, steady silence that made people look away. A group of students played soccer in the center of the yard, their shouts loud and carefree, as if nothing had happened. But as Ethan passed near the edge of the field, one of the players, a big, impatient boy who clearly wasn't watching, lunged for the ball and slammed into Ethan's shoulder. Ethan staggered, nearly fell. The ball rolled away. A beat of silence, like someone had cut the music mid-song. Heads turned. People held their breath. Ethan straightened, said nothing. It wasn't the silence of submission anymore. It was something else, something still and chilling, like a lake right before the undertow pulls from deep beneath. The boy, who had collided with him, looked at Ethan, hesitating, then muttered, "Sorry, I didn't mean to." No reply. Ethan just looked at him. Not with anger, not with forgiveness, but as if he was seeing past a mask everyone else still chose to wear. Another student nearby, half joking, half nervous, said, "You okay? You don't seem mad or anything." Ethan turned, slowly. His eyes, deep and dark as iced water, met theirs, and in that moment, the entire yard seemed to fall still. Laughter stopped. The ball rolled to a halt. Even the wind threading through the trees seemed to pause. Then Ethan spoke, voice low, each word deliberate. "One day, people will come to realize where their limits are. Nothing more." He turned, away, leaving behind a hush filled with confusion, unease, and curiosity. Something in the air buzzed, not with rage, but with warning. A quiet promise that Ethan's silence wasn't weakness. It was clarity. He had already seen too much, and knew exactly what was coming. A few students nearby stood motionless. No one laughed. Some looked down, avoiding his gaze. Bradley, watching from a distance, saw it too. But this time, his eyes didn't hold the same confidence. Something had shifted, like he'd just realized the reins weren't in his hands after all. That seemingly small moment was a turning point. To most at Crestwood, Ethan had only been a scholarship kid, black, quiet, unremarkable. But that moment, that refusal to react, was the very thing that made people start to wonder, who is he, really? How can someone look at you like that, without saying a word? Silence can swallow the weak whole, but the right kind of silence, at the right moment, can make even the strongest take a step back. That evening, Crestwood fell into silence. The red brick hallways now echoed only with the sound of wind slipping through. But while the schoolyard slept, another battlefield stirred to life. Instagram. Social media at a private school wasn't for the faint of heart. Here, Status wasn't measured by grades, but by likes, comments, and how often your face popped up on the Explore page of the school's soft power elite. Bradley Whitmore had just posted a new story. The image: Ethan's old shoes, worn at the heels, a smudge of mud at the toe, lying quietly inside a locker in the gym. The caption read, "Relic from the last century? Or Gucci's latest low-budget edition?" Within 15 minutes, over 120 views, nearly 50 laughing reactions, and a growing thread of mocking comments. Who let goodwill into Crestwood? Bringing family heirlooms to school to save money? I'm dying at this rising from poverty aesthetic. Ethan didn't respond, but someone had tagged him, then quickly deleted it. The words, swift as blades, left wounds no one could see, but they were real. Some students, who'd only been watching for fun, started to feel something was off. In a private group chat, one messaged, "This feels kinda messed up." Another replied, "Relax, it's just a joke." One girl, Lila, who used to be in Ethan's math class, stared at her phone for a long time, then quietly hit unfollow on Bradley's profile. No one noticed, no one asked, and no one else followed her lead. Elsewhere, in a modest faculty apartment, Ms. Martinez, Crestwood's beloved English teacher, known for being kind but staying out of student drama, scrolled past the story while sipping her tea. She paused for a second, a faint crease in her brow. But then she simply shook her head, put the phone down, and turned to grade tomorrow's assignments. Not my place, she told herself. They'll figure it out on their own. But sometimes, they'll figure it out is just another way of saying the adults chose to look away. Meanwhile, in his own room, Ethan opened his phone. The screen lit up in the dark, reflecting in his eyes, blank and unreadable. No outrage, no tears. But somewhere deep in his gaze, something shifted. Quietly, dangerously, like the still air before a storm. Not because Ethan wasn't hurt, but because he understood, with crystal clarity, that every word, every image, every laugh was exposing the truth behind those who believed they were above others. He set the phone down, didn't scroll any further. Then gently opened his window, letting the night breeze drift in. Outside, the sky was soft and black, strangely peaceful. But Ethan didn't need to shout. He didn't need to react, because the weak often scream loudest. But the one holding the ace stays quiet. The next morning, Crestwood's main hallway was packed with students heading to class, yet the air felt heavier than usual. No one said anything out loud, but everyone had seen last night's story. Ethan walked slowly past the rows of lockers, his eyes fixed straight ahead, avoiding everyone. But he could feel it. Every glance, every half-smile, every whispered conversation abruptly ending as he passed. It lingered like a wordless, persistent background melody, playing endlessly in the minds of those who watched. In one corner of the hallway stood Kai Nguyen, a sophomore, Asian American, short black hair, headphones always on, holding his phone tightly. Kai wasn't part of Bradley's group, nor particularly close with Ethan. He was simply the kind of student who watched far more than he spoke. He swiped through the story one more time, his thumb hovering over the report button. Then stopped. Kai's gaze drifted across the hallway, instantly meeting Bradley's icy stare. Bradley leaned against a nearby locker, surrounded by his friends. No words were necessary, just one lingering, emotionless glare. A look clearly spelling out, "What do you think you're doing?" Kai swallowed hard. His thumb pulled back from the report button, slowly moving toward back. He turned off his phone and slipped it into his pocket. No one blamed Kai, but he wouldn't forgive himself either. He simply stood there, watching Ethan silently disappear down the hall, before finally lowering his head. Not everyone who stayed silent agreed with what happened, but in a world where the wrong kind of laughter received unanimous applause, the fear of being left behind was stronger than anyone's conscience. A girl walked past Ethan, her phone open on Instagram. Her eyes brushed over him briefly, quickly turning away. Even those who had seen Ethan solve math problems in class or nodded when he raised his hand now retreated into their safe zones, silent, invisible, uninvolved. At the far end of the hallway, a teacher straightened his tie in the reflection of a locker window. He noticed Ethan pass. He also saw the hesitation in Kai's eyes, the desire to do the right thing, followed by surrender. Yet he said nothing. Once again, an adult chose to stay out of it. In the middle of that long hallway, Ethan walked alone, back straight. No friends, no allies, nobody by his side. Yet his shoulders didn't slump. He didn't falter. He didn't turn away. And that silence, in the eyes of those who watched, was no longer the sign of a boy enduring quietly. It was the ominous signal of something dark, something steadily building inside him. Just because no one spoke up didn't mean no one saw. But when what's right isn't defended, what's wrong quietly becomes the unspoken law. Math class that afternoon began in a heavy, uncomfortable silence. The air felt strange, as if every student was quietly waiting for something to happen, something no one dared name. Ethan walked into the classroom, the same solitary figure as Jait, always. A plain shirt, neat hair, eyes staring straight ahead. But today, the looks he received were no longer contemptuous. Instead, they were conflicted. At the front row, whispers started to spread. Someone scrolled through Bradley's story, murmuring softly, "Still wearing those shoes? Let's see how long he holds up." Class dragged on slowly. As the hour drew to an end, Mr. Peterson approached the chalkboard, a rare spark of excitement on his face. He picked up a piece of chalk and filled the board with an intricate math problem, complicated enough to cause groans across the classroom. "This one's advanced," he said. "You don't have to participate if you don't want." Any volunteers? No hands rose. The class sat still. Mr. Peterson was about to erase the board when a quiet voice broke the silence, barely louder than a whisper. "May I try, sir?" All heads turned simultaneously. Ethan stood up. At that instant, the room seemed to bend. No one spoke, but their eyes raced through 1,000 thoughts. Him? Really? He stepped forward, chalk in hand. But not the usual classroom chalk. Instead, it was a long piece, silver-tipped, the kind you'd only find in the principal's office. Bradley tensed slightly. A friend glanced at him. He wasn't smiling. Ethan began writing. The room became utterly silent, as if all air had vanished. Each stroke he made was swift and confident, yet without the slightest hint of arrogance. He broke down the complicated equation, step by step, transforming it, rearranging it, merging it back together. Each line flowed smoothly, elegantly, like a graceful geometric symphony. The class watched in awe. Mr. Peterson narrowed his eyes. As Ethan approached the final step, the teacher suddenly froze, lips parted in disbelief. This method, he recognized it immediately. Too familiar, "Where did you learn this?" Mr. Peterson asked. His voice lowered noticeably. Ethan looked up, neither prideful nor hesitant. "My father taught me." His voice was quiet, yet loud enough to silence the entire room. Mr. Peterson quickly returned to his desk, scanning the class roster, his finger stopping abruptly at the 14th line. His eyes lingered on the name Parker. Ethan. The surname Parker struck softly against everyone's perception. Mr. Peterson paused, eyes glancing around cautiously, checking if anyone else had noticed. Then he said slowly, quietly yet distinctly, "Parker." A girl at the third table furrowed her brow. "Wait. Parker? Like the principal's last name?" Another student spoke louder, half joking, half serious. "Hold up. You're saying—" "His dad is—" Bradley stiffened, staring at Ethan as if witnessing something impossible. His hand tightened around the edge of his desk. Mr. Peterson cleared his throat quietly, as though hiding his thoughts, then softly said, "You did well, Ethan. Take your seat." But the revelation had already spread. After class, Crestwood's hallway was no longer the playground of just one group. Glances shifted direction, not mocking smiles, but wary eyes. One of Bradley's friends turned away as Ethan walked past. Another pretended to stare into his phone. Bradley stood alone near a stone column, watching Ethan leave. His brow furrowed, deeply. No one said a word, but everyone knew. The hidden order had begun to fracture. Ethan said nothing. He just kept walking. Same stride, same shirt, same eyes. But everything around him had changed forever. Within just a few hours after that fateful math class, the name Ethan Parker was no longer an overlooked entry at the bottom of the class roster. Instead, it had become the center of whispered conversations, a secret everyone knew, but no one dared say aloud, "He's the principal's son." Absolutely. Parker, great grades, got in without even an interview. He's smart, like, doesn't even have to prove anything. So, wait, did we bully the wrong guy? Every whispered word pierced tiny holes into the mask Bradley Whitmore had carefully built over 3 years, constructed from laughter, sarcasm, and tight control. And for the first time ever, Bradley was losing control. Lunch period, Crestwood. Cafeteria. Bradley's table, once loud and overflowing with laughter, now had just 2 people. Then, only him. Nolan privately texted, "Sitting with the STEM group today, gotta study." Jason was busy with debate club stuff. Lily, who had once been Bradley's constant companion, had just changed her profile picture to Crestwood's logo, along with the hashtag, "She stand with what's right." Bradley scrolled through his phone, seeing someone tag Ethan in a story, captioned, "Sometimes silence speaks louder than words." He didn't react. He didn't know whether to feel angry, scared, or simply deny what was happening. Entering the classroom, the seat next to him was empty. Something unheard of before. A girl began to set her bag down, saw Bradley, then quickly moved elsewhere. The teacher walked in, nodded to the class. His eyes paused slightly longer as they reached Ethan. Ethan simply lowered his head, said nothing, but his silence felt like the eye of a storm. No wind, no rain, yet everyone sensed something massive approaching. Bradley glanced around. Everyone continued their work or conversations, but no longer did any gaze meet his with admiration. Some eyes avoided him. Others turned cold. Bradley opened his phone, checking the group chat Crestwood Empire, now renamed Team Project Bio. The message history was empty. All member names removed. Only one final message remained. "Sometimes the dragon turns out to be just a lizard with a loud roar. In the restroom, Bradley reached to push the door open, but someone shut it in, front of him. He stood there, 1 second, 2 seconds, listening as the latch clicked closed from the inside. Nobody said a word, but no one stood by him anymore either. In the hallway, Ethan walked past. Same eyes, quiet, steady, unprovocative. But the way Ethan moved, how the hallway seemed to part effortlessly before him, made it impossible to deny the invisible power. Growing around him, a younger student began pointing toward Ethan, only to be quickly pulled back by a friend. "Don't. He's the principal's son." "Seriously?" "Not sure, but look around. Nobody dares touch him now." Bradley sat alone in the classroom after everyone had left. He opened his phone to his messages with Ethan. Still just a blank screen. No conversations, no texts, no replies. Ethan didn't need to say anything. Didn't need to retaliate. Didn't need to make threats. Yet somehow, he'd managed to shift Bradley's entire world off its axis. And that was the most frightening thing of all. You've just witnessed a quiet, yet deeply satisfying reversal. No punches thrown, no voices raised, just the unmistakable clarity of truth, strong enough to topple false power on its own. If this scene gave you a sense of relief, knowing justice is finally finding its voice, then subscribe. Because Ethan's journey isn't over yet, and what comes next will grip you even tighter. A thin piece of paper landed softly on Bradley's desk at the end of class. No one said a word. None of the teachers met his eyes directly. Only one line stood coldly printed. Student summons, Bradley Whitmore. Principal's office, 2:15 p.m. He stared at those words, his heartbeat stumbling. No one around asked him anything. A few glanced, but no one dared smile. The air seemed to freeze. For the first time, Bradley felt a chill in the middle of the day. 10 p.m. The administrative hallway was disturbingly empty. Light streamed through, large windows casting long shadows on the walls like silent mirrors watching his every step. Bradley's footsteps echoed sharply. Click, click, bouncing back and forth like a gavel striking before sentencing. Tick, tock, tick, tock. The wall clock outside the principal's office slowed, deliberately stretching out the inevitable. Bradley tugged nervously at his collar. An indescribable anxiety crept into his chest, spreading down into his arms. He knocked. 2 firm taps. No answer. The door handle felt ice-cold under his fingertips as he slowly turned it. Click. The door swung open. The air inside was cool, heavy with the scent of polished wood and old books. The principal's desk sat at the far end of the room, curtains half drawn. On the wall behind it hung a large photo of generations of distinguished students. But what stopped Bradley dead in his tracks was the figure sitting in the chair, facing, away from the door, a leather chair, and in it, Ethan. No introductions necessary, no names spoken. But the way Ethan sat, back straight, hands resting gently on his thighs, the sunlight softly touching his profile, was enough to lock down the entire room. Bradley stood frozen, staring at Ethan's back. Suddenly, every action from the past, few weeks rushed back, every mocking word, every cruel glance, every tray of food he'd knocked over, Ethan didn't turn immediately. He simply sat, silent. It was that very silence that forced Bradley to step back slightly. His hand tightened around the strap of his backpack, not even sure why. And then, Ethan turned. Not quickly, not abruptly, slowly, calmly, as if he'd known. Precisely this moment would come, had waited patiently for it. His gaze settled on Bradley, not angry, not hurt, just deeply, suffocatingly quiet. "No, I forgive you. No, you deserve this. Only, I knew, from the beginning. And I let you walk yourself here." That look shattered the last defense in Bradley's eyes. The principal's office door gently closed behind Bradley. No sound, but in Bradley's head, a deafening roar erupted. Not from Ethan, but from everything Bradley himself had sown. The silence inside the principal's office was so heavy, Bradley's held breath was clearly audible. Ethan still sat there, straight-backed, eyes fixed ahead, like a silent witness. On the desk lay a thick file, neatly placed by Principal Parker. As he entered, his posture was stern, his eyes sharp but not cold. "Thank you for arriving promptly, Bradley," he began as he sat down. His voice was calm, steady, devoid of unnecessary emotion. Bradley gave a slight nod. His fingers tightened together, heart pounding faster as Mr. Parker opened the folder. "I'll get straight to the point. You're not here today because Ethan is my son." He looked directly into Bradley's eyes. "You're here because you've severely violated the school's moral standards, and this isn't the first time." Bradley opened his mouth slightly, as if about to speak, but Mr. Parker's gaze stopped him. He began placing evidence on the desk: cafeteria camera photos, screenshots from social media posts, mocking comments, complaints from other students. "You haven't just insulted Ethan. You've repeated a pattern of behavior, taking advantage of others' silence to create jokes, distort images, and maintain a false sense of power based on fear." He paused, his voice lowering, firm but not gentle. "Ethan wasn't your only victim. Younger students mocked for their clothes. A girl reported your group's harassment in the hallway. We watched silently until silence was no longer acceptable." Bradley lowered his head, face burning. The echoes of past laughter returned, now transformed into the voice of judgment from deep within himself. "And let me make this very clear." Mr. Parker paused, eyes piercing Bradley's. "You aren't facing disciplinary action because Ethan is my son. You're facing it because of what you did wrong, repeatedly, without recognizing the consequences." His voice grew firmer, like a judge delivering a final verdict. "At Crestwood, I don't protect my son through my position. I protect every student, through justice." He slid the folder toward Bradley. His gaze was firm, yet compassionate in a strict way. "I believe students are allowed to make mistakes, but only when you admit your mistake can your integrity truly be restored." Bradley bit down on his lip. His hands trembled, not from fear, but because for the first time he was forced to face himself with nowhere left to hide. Ethan raised his head for the first time during the conversation. There was no resentment, no contempt. His eyes mirrored his father's, calm, steady, seeing straight through. "No, I forgive you. No, you deserve this. Only, I'm here. I don't need you to fall. I just need you to wake up." Mr. Parker spoke one final time. "The disciplinary committee meets this weekend. I won't be participating as a father. I'll recuse myself from voting. Because if a principal can't separate personal interest from justice, he doesn't deserve to lead." The air fell quiet. Then he nodded softly. "You may go." Bradley stood up, eyes moist, but no tears falling. As he passed through the door, his shoulders slightly slumped. not from the weight of punishment, but from the sudden, painful relief of an ego beginning to collapse, ready to rebuild. The next morning, Crestwood felt strangely quiet. Even though the bells still rang, the halls still filled, and shoes still clicked against the white tile floor, the atmosphere had shifted. Everything moved slower, softer, more cautiously. Bradley stepped onto campus with eyes sunken from lack of sleep. No one smiled. No one greeted him. The nods he'd once received became averted glances. As he entered the cafeteria, a group of students silently stood and left their table. Nobody yelled. Nobody scolded him. Yet that silence weighed heavier than any accusation ever could. He knew it wasn't because of the principal. It wasn't even because Ethan said anything. It was because everyone had finally seen. And they had chosen sides. In stark contrast, Ethan walked into school exactly as he always did. Neat, simple, quiet. But this time, the looks aimed at him weren't contemptuous. Nor were they entirely fearful. They were admiring, respectful. They recognized something they'd previously overlooked. A younger student stepped timidly toward him. Kai, the one who'd almost reported the story, then stopped. Kai lowered his head slightly, an unspoken apology. Ethan nodded gently, quiet, without resentment. No one needed words of forgiveness, just the understanding that silence wasn't weakness. Midway down the hallway, Ethan passed Bradley. Once at opposite ends of the social spectrum, one a controller, the other an outcast, they now slipped quietly past each other like two parallel lines destined never to intersect again. Bradley lowered his gaze. A nearby student, May, watched Ethan pass, then blurted out, "Aren't you satisfied?" Ethan stopped walking. He didn't turn around. He stood still for a brief moment. Then he replied, in a voice steady and certain as a mathematical truth, "No. Bullies always dig their own holes. I just sit back and let them fall in." No more words were needed. His statement ended an entire, painful chapter, not with a slam, but with the quiet click of reason locking shut. At the end of the hallway, a large poster glittered in the sunlight. Crestwood, a school for the elite. Ethan approached it. He paused, looked up at the bold letters. No smile, no anger, just standing. Quiet, small against the scene, yet solid and unyielding like a pillar facing the wind. Ethan stood alone in the long corridor, sunlight streaming through the glass ceiling. Students moved around him, rushing by, chatting. But Ethan remained there, a steady anchor amid the flow. Thank you for staying until the very end of this journey. If you believe that justice doesn't need to shout, and that silence at the right moment can be the most powerful force of all, please give this video a like and subscribe to our channel, so we can keep bringing you stories that touch the heart like this one. Who were you in this story? The silent bystander? The judge? Or the one brave enough to make things right? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because your words might awaken something powerful in someone else. Silence doesn't mean weakness. Kindness doesn't mean defeat. And sometimes, just one person standing firm is enough to change an entire system.